I'm Awais Qureshi. I serve as the Marketing and Programs Chair here at the M&A Forum. And today I'll be joined by Malcolm Peace, President at Tsetserra Growth Partners, who purchases companies between $3 to $12 million in revenue and modernizes them. Essentially goes in there, rolls up his sleeves and modernizes them with respect to people, with respect to technology, with respect to growing into new markets. And we'll be sharing that particular story. What really stood out to me about Malcolm is his willingness to do what his competitors might not be. You know, the business acquisition space is very competitive. There's very small supply, limited supply of really great businesses with upside growth potential. And there are tons of buyers out there that are competing for those same businesses, competing to buy those same businesses. And so it's Malcolm's approach to actually going and acquiring those businesses where I would say it really starts, and what I would like the audience to take away when it comes to the ability of someone going out there and really standing apart from the rest of their competitors. So I invite you to join me during this conversation today. Hope you enjoy. Before we dive further into the conversation, why don't you share with everyone what's your background? How did you find yourself buying businesses of all things? You don't just wake up one day and say, you know what, I want to just go out there and start just buying up businesses.
I'll take it back not too far, but I think the big thing that came about was I started doing partnership deals. I started there and came out of MBA school, kind of didn't have a traditional background, found my way into private equity. We were doing cybersecurity and defense contracting company stuff at that time. Totally was not my space. I learned a lot, but definitely was not my space. And so I looked around and ended up partnering with two guys in Austin that were doing hospitality and food and beverage businesses. And so we jumped kind of straight into that. That was kind of early days of independent sponsor. We were, learning some more on the B2B side, but they were doing all B2C. So I was brought in to essentially do their B2B business development. And as time went on, we found that as I was presenting more and more opportunities, presenting things that we thought we could move forward with and add value, they weren't really interested. And then 2020 happened, and I became very apparent that they weren't interested, and they kind of kept close to what they wanted to do, and no one really wanted to take a risk. And so summer of 2020 kind of realized through a number of conversations, primarily we were hiring all these people to come in and do these real estate stuff with us, whether it was the core sample guy, the roll-off dumpster person, or whatever it might be. They were all #1 search result when we would just Google them, but they were all the owners of the business that would show up. They were the owners that would answer the phone call. They were the owners that were constantly interacting with us. And so what I ended up finding was, hey, they don't have a succession plan whatsoever. And so there's other players in the market now that have made this very apparent to everybody, but at the time it wasn't as apparent to me or many of my friends. And so as a result, that's kind of where we kicked off. So the first deal was we ended up not moving forward with it, but it was a processor for wood posts, silly thing, but like 4x4 posts that people need, and they're all sorts of different environments. Like, we found a processor for that, right? And so we went under contract. We ended up walking away. He wanted some more, when we came to the closing table. But all that to be said, it was kind of that moment where I realized, hey, I can do this on my own, as my other partners were kind of getting distracted with the other things they needed to kind of shore up and focus on. So that was the kickoff of day one.
Isn't that great that it just gives you that edge over everyone else, where you're able to see certain opportunities where others are either not seeing or they're seeing challenges there?
Sure.
Right?
I think it's a nice way to summarize it. I think we've learned a lot along the way. But at the end of the day, I had some pretty pivotal conversations, much as anybody would in their career or their trajectory. But one of the big things was, what can we actually tangibly add value? I was talking to somebody yesterday that's all into commercial or to residential services, and I don't know where I can add value there. So as a result, it was really narrowing down where can we truly add value in the equation. I'm a roll up the sleeves, like let's get to work and kind of person. And so as a result, I had to really kind of assess that, and that's kind of how the thesis developed.
Well, as we get further, we're going to find out where you roll up your sleeves and where you actually get in and get your hands dirty.
Sure.
So let's think about, where do you guys fall in place with respect to, here's Tsetserra Growth Partners.
Sure.
And here's private equity.
Yeah.
Here's some serial or strategics, right? Where does Tsetserra fall in place?
Yeah. So we buy 3 to 12 million in revenue type businesses exclusively in Texas, all blue collar industrial type businesses. I love being in Houston here today, but a lot of the time we're looking in secondary markets. We're looking at other places that maybe people aren't going to. Someone the other day, I was speaking with a banker and he was like, "Oh, Austin must be competitive." I'm like, "It's funny, we don't own a single business in Austin, but I live there." So, at the end of the day, we're willing to do unnecessary things, and I think that's allowed us. And to be honest with you, like, my goal is not to become something, right? Like, my goal is to be a dad first that ultimately gets to own businesses along the way. And so, we'll probably own 10 businesses over the next 10 years, and maybe I'll have a tiny little Cessna that I get to fly around, right? So that's my end goal, right?
Yeah.
And so as a result, like, that's planning kind of our strategy forward.
That's really interesting. What I find so unique about all of this is you've really defined niche,
Sure.
right? And riches are in the niches, as the saying goes. So when you talk about blue collar businesses, I mean, I'm thinking HVAC, I'm thinking plumbers, I'm thinking, wood cutters and metal shops.
Yeah.
Right. So where, again, define exactly what is blue collar businesses that you guys are going after?
So I usually caveat our kind of criteria is we won't go to El Paso because it's a different time zone, and we won't buy residential businesses, but any other time someone's getting their hands dirty, we're willing to take a look at it. So that's kind of the way I usually kind of preface it, in the sense that we'll go buy a manufacturing company. Right now we're looking at government contracted infrastructure businesses. Wow. That's kind of our main focus kind of in 2025. And so we've learned a lot of the ways. We went under some LOIs last year and had some lending challenges, and so we were learning along the way. So all that to be said, that I believe that will be our next platform. We've been doing manufacturing historically, and so that's a trajectory, and we found that we can add tangible value there.
Got it. And again, I mentioned during my introduction that it's your willingness to do something,
Sure.
particularly when it comes to deal sourcing.
Sure.
Why don't you share with the audience exactly what that is?
Yeah.
And why you've found that to be so effective
Sure.
over the course of the last 4 years?
Yeah, I've got a friend who says it really, really well, so I'll summarize what he says. Everybody's willing or able or has some sort of little advantage, and I feel very comfortable in a conference setting or whatever the case may be. I feel very comfortable talking to people about their business. I like sitting in the room with the 75-year-old that says, "Hey, yeah, I'd like to sell it to you," and he's got his pictures behind him and all those types of things. A lot of the time, I found that when you're in a trade show or something of that nature, people are often in that environment of selling of some component. They're trying to either push their business forward, or they're trying to merge with a competitor, or whatever it might be. They're trying to make something happen, and so that's where we found ourselves, is that we often go narrow down. Sometimes it's 30 booths for that matter, but going to the industry conferences and saying, "Hey, I would love to buy your business." And I've got an analyst, and we really do this. We'll grab 2 hotel rooms, and he'll put a list together of all the Texas businesses, and we'll just go around for 2 days and introduce every single one, and we walk away with some unique opportunities. So that happened in November at the PAC Expo. We do machinery businesses, and so that's kind of what we do, our strategy compared to others.
Okay. And so did that just come up again? Did you just wake up one day and say, "I'm going to start going to trade shows," and it's just, what happened there?
Yeah. I've got a friend who writes handwritten cards to every single owner that he's trying to attract, and he writes countless of them. I am probably not the best scribe, so we had to figure out a different way to make volume happen in some way where it was concentrated. And so I said to myself, hey, all these people are already here on their own dime. They're wanting to get something out of this arrangement. And so let's go to an environment where people are willing to do some sort of business.
Yeah. It's that personal touch. I mean,
Sure.
isn't it crazy how that just, I mean, it goes so long to actually create that level of relationship with someone, right?
Yeah.
So now let's get into, once you actually find that company, and you said that you're not one to shy away from rolling up your sleeves, getting your hands dirty.
Sure.
So what does that mean? I mean, let's think about it from a quarterly sort of a milestone.
Yeah.
So first 90 days, what happens once you acquire that company? I mean, are you hiring new people? Are you buying new equipment? Are you just cleaning house with what's happening?
Sure. So we definitely have a strategy, but I want to preface what you just said, and I would say I almost slightly disagree. I heard someone say recently they became on one of the leadership positions of an Asian company that happens to be operating out of California, and he said a lot of their interactions with the senior and the board is they're thinking in decades. And for me, like, I'm thinking in decades because I know I have 30 years potentially working in this capacity, and so as a result, like, I want to do that, and that's also the alignment we have with our investors is that we are thinking in decades. So as a result, the 90 days is super important, but it's super critical in that moment not to be thinking such a sprint, but thinking, if I was to think of this as a marathon, what would I want to do right now? And so we spent a lot of the time focused on how do I preserve what's actually here if somebody were to leave. I've got many friends, we've had situations, I haven't had as bad as others, but where people leave day one. You show up, you introduce yourself, and all of a sudden people are quitting on the spot. The most recent one, we had 2 people leave the week before I took over. So, we recovered and it was fine. But, all that to be said, a lot of the time we're protecting that knowledge as best we can, and protecting what's going on and currently happening, because I'm aware that this space, kind of the sub 10 million in revenue space, a lot of the time it's the business is at risk to some capacity, right? You're either too high of concentration with a customer, or you have some IP that someone's trying to take from you, or whatever the case may be. So I'm like, okay, we need to mitigate risk at all costs. Right. So what does that look like? And so I feel like we've accomplished our goal when people are like, oh my gosh, you're working me out of a job, right? Because we've taken information and put it in such a way that it's actually understandable to the general population of the company or customers or whatever it might be. So that's where we spend a lot of the time for that 90 days with a decade viewpoint on that point.
Okay, define that decade viewpoint, right?
Yeah.
Again, what is happening, and obviously you haven't owned a business for 10 years yet, however, what does the vision look like? And again, what sort of ways are you actually implementing that modernization of that business as you move forward? Maybe it's that maybe the first 12 months are just you cleaning house. But the next 36 months is maybe moving into new markets. Maybe you're rolling out a new offering, or maybe you're, seeing, maybe it's time for a brand refresh. Who knows?
Yeah, fair. We're cleaning up last year's financials, and we often have these conversations about what percentage went to R&D. So that's definitely a component of it. Mm-hmm. Hey, what are we actually pushing forward? All those types of things. But that's in hindsight of the last 2 years that we've built a foundation that we actually understand what's occurring in the business. What's our unique proposition? A lot of the time when I go to these industry conferences, there's vendors right next to each other and they all look the same. It's so-and-so does this, that does this, that does this, right? And so for us, it was like, okay, how can we actually tangibly protect something that's going on here? And so that's where we spent a lot of time documenting that stuff. But then after that, it's like, okay, where else can this be taken if this is unique to us? And again, like, I think, I don't think I'm unique in this way, but we've done it in such a way where we've actually been able to document and make more strategic decisions that you wouldn't make normally at these small businesses. For instance, like when we first started, we bought this first manufacturing company, and everybody's like, oh, we've got to cut salaries, everything's important, we got to cut hourlies, we got to keep it at this rate. Turns out that 80% of our cost was in our material. So if I was stressing out about the dollar I wanted to save on this one welder, it wasn't really worth the return, right? And so I had to explain that over and over and over again. But that had been ingrained by the last owner of we've got to cut people if they want more than this number. And it's like, wait, hold on a second. Why don't we figure something else out?
Material cost.
Yeah, material cost is 80%. And no one knew that until we actually documented the bill of materials. And so you can make decisions that are way more informed when you start taking the information that's in people's minds. And so that's where we spend a lot of the time. And I'll be honest, I've never fired somebody, and I feel really proud about that, but I've worked people out of jobs, right? And I really mean that. They don't want to do what we do. And so, we've got ERP systems that we implement, and guys have to be accountable to themselves, and they don't show up the next day, right? And so, but that's the way we've done it, and I don't like Texas Workforce Commission, so that's the way we do it. So, and so, we've learned a lot along the way, and that's our little learning step.
No, as a matter of fact, you bring up a great point, because one of the things that Malcolm does is, he's got great posts online. So if you haven't followed him yet, start following him on LinkedIn. And so one of the posts that really, again, kind of caught my eye a couple of days ago was you wanted people to check in every single day. And then you got pushback from a couple of people of like, hey, you can't do something as simple as check in via text, right? And it's not a big thing. You just check in. So, that accountability, that level of buy-in from employees is a big deal. How do you create that?
I don't know if it's created as much as it is creating a culture that they want to be a part of. So controversial, totally understand this, but I really respected, in a lot of ways, I've respected different leaders at different points. And one of the things that I thought Elon did unique was when he went into Twitter, he walked in and he said, let it sink in. And really what he was communicating is like, this is what's occurring. And as a result, you can either choose to be a part of this. I am convinced that hiring went up during that period of time, that he actually had people that wanted to be a part of that culture do that. And we have seen the same thing. As we've created this and expressed it very early on in the hiring process or soon after someone's hired in a trial period, hey, this is what this is going to look like. You can choose to be a part of this or not. And there's this kind of carrot at the end because of it, right? And so, we've got a system, full disclosure, like we've got a system that I just found that the last 5 minutes of the day, guys are just checked out. And so I was like, how do I utilize those last 5 minutes? And so they get a text message that basically they have to be accountable for the end of their day. And people started blocking that number that comes through from the office, right? And so we found that out, right? And so, everyone does it differently. We've learned along the way. And so soon enough, so-and-so didn't want to answer. And sure enough, like he comes to the end of the year or the later of the quarter, hey, I want to get a promotion or I want to grow. Well, you've got no data to justify any of that.
That's a good point.
And that conversation became mute and became a black and white kind of conversation.
Point,
So we don't like subjective conversations. We like black and white conversations. Maybe it's the way that my mind works, but we've created a culture where now the team enjoys that, right? The culture has created itself in some ways.
So have you adopted that same practice of just walking into a business that you just acquire and you just walk in with that sync? Like, hey, let's sync in. I'm just coming in with some changes.
No, I haven't done that yet. No whatsoever. But I often, I tell people the first job is make sure their paycheck's clear for those for a few weeks. Then after that, you can start extracting information. So that's what we spend a lot of our time doing.
That's a good point. What about, I find visibility on just data, right? Specific data, just like you talked about. The assumptions of that particular founder that's just now, given you this business and handed over this business to you, their assumptions are that my biggest cost of business is my human capital. You have now come in and created some clarity around, no, it's actually your cost of goods, right? So, or cost of production. How do you create that visibility? What are you bringing in? I mean, is it technology and what kind of technology are you bringing in to do that?
Yeah, so I have to give full credit. We've built the team. When we first got started, I hired this agency. They kind of worked, and I kept telling this guy Neil that I worked with for many years, hey, you've got to work with me one day. And I literally was flying back from overseas this past, or I guess it's a year now, and found out he was leaving that agency. And I got on a plane and I was emailing him, hey, when I land in SFO, you need to answer my phone call. And so he came on full time. So full credit to him. He's really implemented kind of the vision that we wanted to see at a kind of scale. We were doing it kind of okay. And I felt like in a lot of ways, I was always pulling teeth to get more out of this agency. And when he came on full board and has now hired other folks under him, we can now run full speed. So I used to say, we were in the crawling phase. We're still infants in some ways, but at the same while, I feel like we're now making progress in a direction. So yeah, to that point, I mean, sometimes it's as simple as, hey, can I, and meeting them where they're at, right? Like I interact with a lot of folks that are sometimes not even really computer literate. And so meeting them where they're at, creating in such a way, and sometimes I've had to sit with 7 hours with my supervisor, hey, we need to go step by step in this process for this bill of material, or we need to go step by step about what happens here. And what I also have found, and again, I don't think this is unique to me, is once you start kind of having that as the culture and the basis of what you're doing, other things come from that. You can learn more, you can make better decisions or whatever it might be. Hey, we want to make this adjustment, or we want to go buy material direct from suppliers now. How is that going to affect all these type of things? And those conversations become kind of normal within our organization. So anyway.
That's a good point. What have you found that's different now versus when you first started doing this? I mean, what sort of changes have you seen?
Yeah, in the organization or in just the environment of buying businesses?
You purchased this particular manufacturing company 3-4 years ago, right? So what have you seen that's different now in that particular company now having made all these changes?
One, we can attract talent actually, which has been interesting. People want to be a part of that. I think I could be wrong, and I'm just saying with this so much caveat. there's a particular type of person that doesn't mind that their score is on the scoreboard. And then there's others that don't. They want to hide. And when you're in an environment where everyone's scoreboard is illuminated, that tends to create either camaraderie around what you're doing if you do it right, or at the same while, you get to also say, hey, I'm just better than that guy. Yeah. And so that's kind of some of the things that we've developed is where, hey, your scoreboard is there. And I really mean this. I've been in businesses that are doing 10 to 20, 30, 40 million that are in the same kind of industry as us, manufacturing, kind of niche manufacturing. Yeah. They have all these things to some extent. Some are implementing it better than others, that some of them have more displays and things going and KPIs that everybody gets to see. But a lot of them in this space that we're in just don't. And they either didn't know how to do it, or quite candidly, they're obviously doing well for themselves. A lot of them are spitting off $1 million for themselves personally plus, and so why would they make a change is a lot of what happens. But what they don't recognize is that once they leave, there's a big vacuum that takes place, right? And so I didn't want to become the filler of that vacuum. We made that mistake super early on. And so as a result, we had to get into this habit of how do we create this culture that's around this. So we've learned, but I think that, I think this is just the natural progression of a business that wants to go to an 8-figure spot, is that you have to start putting in these systems that can be measurable. Others have made it kind of haphazardly that way, but I don't think you sustain that.
Yeah. What about as this business grows? I mean, are you maybe looking for expanding into new spaces because you're just running out of space? I mean, how does that kind of play a role into this? Yeah. Or even buying new equipment? Maybe you have to finance that equipment.
Sure.
Tell us about what happens in that sort of a scenario.
Yeah, great question. So we're under LOI right now, full disclosure. I can't tell you much about it other than that the real estate are going to probably be a part of that. And so that space is bigger. We're going from 35,000 square feet, 40,000 square feet to about 60, 80 or so. And we'll acquire that business and basically fill into the gap there. Interestingly enough, there's slight seasonality with our end users and their end users, and it kind of works. So that's, again, a business that, when we bought this other business, I walked in and said, hey, I'm so-and-so new in town. Just want to shake your hand. Yeah. 2 years later, it's working out. So, and they seem intrigued to continue moving forward. So all that to be said, it definitely plays a role of that. But I would also say one of the things that I've been critical about is that, again, you can get into this habit with you keep everything in-house. You keep into this habit of how do I constantly just train people. We want to document in such a way that I could go do something somewhere else. And so I've created that culture and communicated, hey, we might go get this built across the border. I'm just being honest, right? We've looked at Monterey. I've flown to Monterey and say, hey, there's all these welders that are highly skilled over there. What could that look like for it to come across the border? And so, all that to be said, that's kind of been the culture so that we have options. And to good or bad, we've learned kind of how that works and how that doesn't. And it also has created some, fire behind everybody to say, hey, I want to create my value here. And so, I don't know, we're learning.
As you should be.
Sure.
As you should be. We've been talking about all your sort of successes, all improvements and all of this. What about things that have failed along the way?
I wouldn't categorize it as a failure, but we've done some things out of order. And maybe that's the failure in the sense that we've spent more money initially on or made certain decisions initially. But I think they were the right decisions, just out of order. And I think one of the biggest ones is I was so desperate to protect that IP that I didn't involve the folks that could actually bring value to that IP being spurred along, rather than us kind of working in a vacuum and a darkness. We could have involved them into that conversation a little bit sooner.
Who specifically?
Just super key, supervisors, key employees, managers, anybody that was key that we wanted to hey, if they drop down dead or they leave or they X, Y, and Z, we want to make sure we have that information. Let's just try to get it through any means possible. If we would have involved them in that conversation a little bit more about, hey, here's the end goal, I think we would have gotten more buy-in, which we've had to reshuffle a couple times. Okay, we've created this, we should have made that tweak. Or we've created that and we had to make this tweak. And so Neil, my main he calls himself the tech wizard, but he builds out all our systems and AP and AI and process and protecting that IP. he's been like, hey, we could have done this a lot sooner because we could have involved so-and-so. And so, so we've learned along the ways. I think that our thesis is right. I think that these businesses need a reason to stay around for another 70 years. I mean, we're buying businesses that have been around for decades. And so as a result, I think we're doing that right by the company and the legacy that we get to take over and steward. But at the same while, those people that have been there probably could give us a little more insight than we've given them credit.
So we're going to go back to how you're preserving that legacy because from your perspective, the theme that I'm seeing recurring in your message here is really the people, and your emphasis on the buy-in from the people. And I'd be curious to know specifically, how are you guys structured at the acquirer level? I mean, are you bringing in operating partners or what's happening there?
Yeah, so we made that mistake real early. Malcolm was arrogant and said, hey, I'll come in as the first 6 months and then we'll hire somebody. I've always, for better or for worse, always thought, hey, here's the current model. Can it be tweaked? I've got a lot of friends in PE that use the saying of dead bodies and things like that as they've gone through trading these deals. And I just didn't want to be that type of person. And so I was like, all right, we'll go in, I'll shore it up. I'll do all this work, and as a result, we'll be in this position. That was a huge miss on my part. What I didn't appreciate is a lot of these owners, when they're in the center, they're a centralized business around the owner. He walks in, she walks in, they get to give the commands of the day, they get to say, yeah, pay that bill, don't pay that bill. The actual employees that are around them are actually building a muscle themselves. And I didn't recognize that at the time, that they are actually the ones learning this behavior. They're learning this ongoing circumstance where at the end of the day, they are actually taking implementation every single day and they're used to that being fed, right? And so that was a real hard switch when I would be in for 6 months and then we would bring in an operator after that. And they were like, well, hold on a second. Even though you haven't told me what to do every single day, I'm just used to your tone of voice and how this is approached and so on and so forth. So we learned that, made a big mistake there. And so now we've gotten to a position where now we are acquiring deals in certain parts of the state, and we've identified folks in those regions and those parts that would be interested in and fit the bill. So it would be kind of a stars alignment moment for sure, but at the end result, now we have a bench of people waiting. Hey, I want to do this. I've got a guy named Jason in Dallas that we've looked at an underground utilities company, putting two together kind of in Fort Worth and Dallas, and we're working on it right now. And so he's teed up, he's done well, he has a track record, and we align on what the vision is. So we've made that mistake. I don't recommend it to anybody. Don't be that arrogant, and just trust that you can't just change the way the employees respond to the situation that's previously been established.
Good point. Now let's start looking at the changes, right? I mean, we've come into 2025, and obviously there's been a change in administration, change in legislation, change in regulations. Just yesterday, I don't know who's been following the news in the markets, but man, what a bloodbath, right? DeepSeek, just what I would call like a rug pull moment of just catching everyone by surprise.
Sure.
What are you seeing that's going to change the way that you not just acquire businesses, but the businesses that you've acquired? How are you going to be positioning them and kind of helping them reshift how they're going to continue to compete and how they're going to adapt with all of these changes that are occurring, particularly when it comes to the technology aspect of it, because that disrupts practically everything that we do. It doesn't matter what you're doing.
Yeah, so we, fair question. I feel like I don't know enough about what happened yesterday. I was watching the headlines come through and I'm like, holy cow, maybe I'll wait till this settles down a little bit. But, for us, and this kind of started last year, I think that, in a cycle that we had last year of just election and so on and so forth, I think that CapEx expenditure kind of slowed down. I think that a lot of businesses that were in the CapEx spend kind of space really struggled last year, us as well. And so what we have found and what we're going to have to respond to, and we're trying to work our way through that right now, and I'm literally doing a tour of just regional banks, if there's anybody else in here, and is somebody that's going to be on board with us in some regards, because there's there's this interesting situation that's happening with us is a lot of our competitors are getting very favorable lending situations that they can provide to their end users. And so that's just our particular situation that we're struggling up against right now is our competitors are able to give terms that I just don't know how they do it. And so so I'm trying to like, hey, can we get a quote secretively somehow to figure this out? And so yeah, that's our challenge right now. And so I've been kind of going on a tour bus of things to lending opportunities to see, hey, how can we be competitive for our customers because they want to spread out the payments too. And so that's a big thing for us right now is a lot of the things that we're going to focus on are going to be big ticket items. Even if we go into this government contract infrastructure businesses, like there's going to be a lot of outlay. There's going to be like we have to be able to work with on the kind of lending side of things. So that's a big component for us right now that we're focused on to be competitive.
So go back to the capital aspect of it because I didn't ask you this earlier in the conversation, but and if you want to disclose this, so what is your again, how do you raise capital?
Yeah.
Do you have investors? I mean, do you go to lenders?
Sure.
And when you're holding on to a business for essentially in perpetuity, right?
Yeah.
You have no desire to actually go and sell these and trade these, right?
Sure.
So how do you pay them back? I mean, what does all that look like?
Yeah.
Create that sort of a map.
Yeah. So we, I think we'll stay this way. I'm always knowing that we're open to change, but we've raised capital historically on a deal by deal basis. We create a new entity, its own percentage of my holding company owns in a percentage of that, and we create new LP/GP structures. Ultimately, we raise capital from folks that are currently running businesses or historically have run businesses in the past. They often have a different perspective than maybe somebody else does. They have a different kind of horizon, all those types of things. And what we always communicate and commit to is that we're going to stabilize for 1 year and then we start paying dividends quarterly. So that's what we do. As a result, that's worked for us. Sometimes there's alignment. We've got one situation right now where someone wants out, and we've got to create that liquidity event. And so, often I was just in Atlanta. I've got 2 investors that are there, and we're talking through kind of this year and kind of thoughts and strategies and potentially buying another business in that same space. And they're like, hey, we're planning on holding on for a decade with you. So, it's just that alignment shifts and changes over time. But we historically have worked with folks that have owned businesses, operated businesses, understand what it's like to make payroll, and just understand that business is not printed money. I mean, it's a real work and an opportunity for us to create some outside returns for them. So that's kind of our angle.
Excellent. So Malcolm's 80. He's made it to 80 years of age, right? You've flown your Cessna. You're looking back. How many businesses have you acquired? What sort of an empire have you built? Right? How are you defining success at the age of 80?
I own a Texas ranch in Giddings or something of that nature, and I got a bunch of grandkids around me. Honestly, so I've created a circumstance where I feel good sitting around the table about what I've done, and I don't mean that frivolously. I really mean that. I've sat in rooms where so and so has had a tough go at life, and I would much enjoy that in my day than having to deal with a vendor who wants to get paid. It's so all that to be said, I feel good about that, and we'll be in Texas. I mean, we've learned this, right? Like I tell this story sometimes, but I looked at a business early on in St. Louis. It was a co-packing company, and I was like, dang, I got to take 3 flights or potentially 2 flights to get there, and I'm going to miss this, this, and this. No, let's figure this out differently. And I was talking to a friend sitting over at a Whole Foods, just getting coffee, and he was like, why don't you just stay in Texas? It's the 9th largest economy in the world. I'm like, oh yeah, it is. True. So so I totally stole that from him, and he really helped me to kind of narrow that down. And we'll be in Texas, foreseeably, and if it's 80 where I'm still running these, or we've transitioned in some other way, I'm happy for that. And I've got 2 daughters, and life will continue on, and there'll be other priorities at different times. And my hope is that I keep a good balance on that. I heard a stat one time, and I'm totally butcher it, but I think it's like less than 10% or something crazy that actually ever make it over $1 million in revenue. And so we're looking at businesses that are like a subsect of a subsect, and then you go higher up market and you're a subsect of a subsect, and so on and so forth, right? And that's why a lot of those upper businesses, they just trade hands, right, a lot of the time. And versus I'm looking at a business right now where it's been in the family for 3 generations. And so I feel as though if I'm to steward that, it's not to say, hey, what they did in the past was wrong. It's we are building upon this and we're shoring it up in some ways. I loved your analogy about the boat. Like we're shoring on this and building up from that. And so I often tell people, like, I've accomplished my goal if the owner feels like they can walk in 5 years. because they don't feel like it's like so different. They don't feel like the people would be like, that's the old regime. They weren't worth anything. Like, no, they've actually done a good job, and they got us to a point. And quite candidly, they got themselves to a point maybe they didn't even anticipate. I really mean this. A lot of the owners I sit down with, they're taking home $1 million easy every single year, and so as a result, like, why else would you change that is probably their mentality. And you see behind them, they often have their kids, grandkids, and pictures right behind their desk, and that desk has been the same desk for 30, 40 years, and so on and so forth, that, hey, at the end of the day, if they can walk in 5 years from now and they feel like, it's home, but also at the same while, it's a warm welcome because we built upon what you have built, I feel like I've done my job. So.
Fantastic. Well, Malcolm, thank you so much for joining us here today.
Yeah.
Appreciate you, again, giving your highs and lows and sharing all of that.
Sure.
One other, I want to point this out. So, one of your other posts that really just, again, kind of stuck out at me was your laptop. And I wish I could actually put it up here. So it was a laptop in front of a toilet seat. And, he's talking about, when you think about entrepreneurship, the Instagram version of the entrepreneurship is someone has their laptop with their feet out in front of a beach, right? And here's Malcolm post this. First of all, I got to give it to you. You know what? That actually catches attention because it's like, it's the complete opposite of what someone would post as here's something so glamorous about entrepreneurship. This guy's taking calls during his Hawaii vacations.
We were at Honolulu.
We were in Honolulu, yeah.
And Oahu, and my kiddos, everybody sleeping in the other room. The room is so small. I did not know this. We got a room. I didn't realize how small it was going to be. Pictures were definitely in wide view. Had no idea. So I'm wheeling around this little blue table to get it into the bathroom at 3 a.m. in the morning and to just fit inside the bathroom to make this work. And the window is like frosted, so my kids still could see the glass was lit. Anyways, it was a whole thing. And ironically, like the third call I had, maybe the second day I did that, it was a Zoom call with one of the owners that we were negotiating an LOI with. And they went off camera, and I'm like, why did I do all of this? So anyways, it was a fun journey. But yeah, that's real entrepreneurship. I've done it all, I think, at some point.
Malcolm, peace, everyone.
Thanks so much.
And before we wrap up, this is the part where we're going to turn it over to the audience for a few Q&As. I'm going to limit this to, depending on what does our time look like? Oh, okay. I'm going to limit this to 5 questions, depending on how long it takes Malcolm to answer. So, all right. Anyone? Leah.
Have you made a couple of acquisitions now? Anything that you would not do again? Anyone that you acquired that you decided that wasn't the space for you, or that
Sure.
type of manufacturing? Why was that?
Yeah. I'm going to answer it slightly different. I think we did a really poor job early on due diligence on physical spaces. So one of the things that you can go in and there's all these great firms, many of you are like that. You can go in and do a QOV and you can go through this whole process, but I didn't appreciate how much value it was to like figure out, hey, does this space actually work for us? And I made that mistake, or is it too large? I was stuck in a lease for a long time where we were paying way too much. And that actually was like really frustrating every day, right? I found out literally about a month ago that we had an upstairs, like in one of our buildings. I had no idea. I'm dead serious. And a guy used to apparently sleep up there, and it was the whole thing. It was a funny moment. I got to laugh, but like we hadn't done that. And we did it to the extent of like we wanted to find out if we should buy the real estate or not. And we did some phase 2 studies and we did some other things, but like the physical space, hey, does this work for what we're doing? But you kind of just go off of like, oh, they've always done this, the space kind of fits, and then you realize, wait a second, we're at utilization at like 60% at best. And so that was the mistake we made in our physical space side on the industries we focus on, versus I'm sure, I've got a friend who runs a lawn care company and like they're trying to figure out regions and how far and all that kind of stuff. It's just a different aspect of doing your business day to day. So,
got it. Jason.
So let's assume that I'm an avenue where I can create the manufacturing company that you want to buy.
Mm-hmm.
In today's, where you are right now as far as your business model, what's that box look like as far as the criteria? If they have to check these boxes off before I actually write a check.
Yeah.
And in doing so, what is one of those elements or industries that you need resources to make it happen?
Yeah. Second one's tougher than the first one. I'll start with the first one. I think I think manufacturing has gotten a bad rap in America for so long. I watched John Deere. I was watching very closely. I didn't catch as much of the AI stuff the last 2 days, but like John Deere moved across the border intentionally, and it was a big deal in my opinion. And so, I watched what that looked like, what their timeline was, like all these things that were kind of going through. I was reading as much as I could. And I wish I could just sit down with them. But then I have the backyard situation where we've got Tesla just built a ginormous facility, right? And so there's this weird dichotomy, I think, that's happening right now, that I'm looking at it and saying, what is like the true IP of this business? Like if someone were to really try to replicate what we're doing and we had to hold on to something, because a lot of our patents when we bought a 70-year-old business are expired at this point. And so it's like, okay, what is the one thing that we can kind of truly hold on to, and how do I protect that is often what we're looking at. I was under contract to business not too far from here, that came out of one of the conventions, and I couldn't put my finger on it because they eventually got to the point where they were trying to cut margins, and they were doing stuff in Colombia, and they were doing all these different things and then sticking their name on it. And it was like, wait a second, Colombia could do everything you just did. And so that's concerning to me, right? So that's that one little thing. And I'm not implying that there's a huge plethora of those businesses out there. I think that there are very limited, but I think that that's the true case of American manufacturing at this point, is that you have to be able to do that. Otherwise, you have to switch your business model to where there's a huge chunk, if you're going to sell in America, a huge chunk to service. And that's what I've also seen the change, right? Is like, hey, how do you actually produce a service business out of this, and that become your main bread and butter situation. And so I think that change has happened for some, and some are kind of going through that struggle right now. I met a gentleman around Tyler, Texas, that's doing $25 million a year and just service of all American brand businesses in all of the kind of food space and things that we're in. And he built a nice business on the back of what someone else wasn't willing to pivot their business model to. So that's been what we've been looking for.
Jake?
23, early 24, all the conversations focused on a challenging fundraising environment.
Yeah.
So how have those conversations shifted, especially as I feel like PE's been in the news for not producing the returns that they were expected to, and maybe talk a little bit about how what seems to be this more permanent equity style of investing has led to more fruitful conversation.
Yeah. I think it has, for sure. I think I agree with everything you're saying. I think we picked right the first time, and those conversations the second time became easier, right? SEC is not listening, but like we've been thoughtful about our approach, right? And so as a result, like we've wanted to bring in certain people, and I've built those relationships over time. I try to tell this to folks, like when I'm on LinkedIn or I'm on some sort of platform or some sort of, my buyer or my person that I'm trying to really engage with is actually not a business owner. Very few of them are on that platform. So I'm trying to engage with folks that are around that. The reason I'm excited about sitting here is y'all interact with business owners in the hopes that one day I interact with a business owner you represent, or so on and so forth, or you're just good people that I could bring into a conversation with a business owner that doesn't have that representative, right? And so all that to be said on the investor side is that kind of goes to on the LinkedIn platforms and other things like that. People hear about what we're doing. Hey, I resonate with what you're doing. I had a really informed conversation when we first got started. I was standing at a gas station and I was having a conversation with a guy. He had a whole like CRO background, chief revenue officer background. That was his whole like MO, and great career in it. And I asked him like, oh, so what's the sales strategy for the business that you just invested $250,000 in? And he's like, I didn't ask. And that was shocking to me, right? And I think that's changed, where like people actually want to know what your thesis is, right? I think that was early, and now on the buzz with so much noise and so many players coming into things, you have to have a thesis. You have to say like, here's what I'm going to hang my coat on and say, this is what we're going to do at the end of the day. And so we buy blue collar industrial type businesses and we implement software to protect their legacies. That's what we do every single day.
Carrie?
So you've alluded to, throughout your conversation today that you're very thoughtful, you're very intentional. So as you're coming into an organization, whether it be in the initial audit or as you're in the business long term, how do you identify the critical inflection point between the intangibles such as culture and influence, right? Yeah. And then the very tangibles of modernization, such as software and systems and automation, sure. But most importantly, how you architect that in a manner that they intentionally bolster one another.
Great question. When I heard you say bolster, immediately I thought to like, how do my people become a part of that? How does that happen like in the organization, which I think is what your intent was. So within 2 weeks, a lot of these organizations, again, we're buying 2 or 3 to 12 million in revenue type businesses. They've never had an org chart before. They've never had an establishment of who reports to who. They kind of just show up and they're like, oh, so-and-so told me to do something today. I guess that's who I report to. But then the boss is always, the owner is always the one doing their pay. And I always thought that was weird, right? Like, I don't want to have these conversations if I don't have to. So I'm going to actually give you, hey, here's the KPI, here's your budget that you actually have to then go hire by. And so within 2 weeks, we established an org chart. I slide it across the table over Texas Roadhouse or some sort of steak, and I say, hey, this is what it looks like, right? Who reports to who? And they often just stare at it, and then somebody will perk up, oh, like I have that title, or I have that. And they just show up. They're just the person that does the thing, right? And what often happens, in my opinion, is that a lot of the organization charts that were maybe like spoken or kind of verbal amongst the team is they have these titles that are very arbitrary. They don't have actual status or KPIs or whatever they really mean. And so we start establishing that. Here is a pay band of a so-and-so. Here is what this happens. And then, so as a result, you can move from here to here. Here's what your trajectory looks like. I had a guy, I guess I could say his name. His name's James. Came in kind of low, bottom of the end.
I know James.
Yeah, and recently we promoted him, and it was very evident. Like, here's the steps you followed. Here's how I can show everybody across. Here's how James showed up every single day. And the days that he didn't, it's actually marked as truly absent, because if you think about our manufacturing business, when we're tracking all this information, if I tell a customer we can produce in this time and then so-and-so is absent for 5 days, it's really like a machine goes offline. And so as a result, like, that person is actually hurting the business in real time every single time they have a family event or something that happens, and we have to kind of figure that out. So that's my commitment to the customers. That's their commitment to us. And then our commitment simultaneously is to allow them to grow here very clear. This is what it looks like. Here's how it's going to happen. Here's exactly when we're going to have promotion conversations. And sometimes they like that, sometimes they don't. But like, that culture is very predictable, which many people actually appreciate.
Yeah. Kuros?
How are you structuring these deals? I know you said that you raised money, but are you leveraging debt?
Yeah.
Do you need to retain majority equity?
Yeah.
Is it a deal by deal basis?
It is a
cookie cutter way.
Yeah, it's deal by deal. We are majority holders on all things. I have all voting rights. I'm all A shares. They are all B shares. The only things I cannot do is dissolve the business or do a merger. So I have to bring them involved in those two aspects. I can take on everything else. I can do everything else. I have full autonomy outside of that. And they're all less than 20% for all sorts of different reasons, as you imagine with any kind of lending situation. So, I find that, again, the people that we're interacting with are either current business owners and they want to diversify their current setup, or they understand, hey, I can bring this tangible value so Malcolm can make this phone call. So when I show up to so-and-so in Atlanta and we're sitting down for 4 hours and we're working through this potential acquisition that we're eyeing, like, it's a very tangible process because I know he's done it, right? And so that's kind of the structure, right? Malcolm's going to go do it. You get to be a part of certain things that I think are big ticket movers.
So you end up putting some of your own money and then you leverage debt as well?
Correct, yeah.
Jason Lee?
Sounds like you carved out a great niche. What would you say your biggest risk or headwind that you potentially face in the next 5 years?
It's a question I struggle with. Yeah, it's a good one. So I'm going to say what I have as tailwinds. I think being in Texas, 9th largest economy in the world, I think we have a lot of opportunity here, right? So I don't think from a sourcing side of things that's my biggest headwind right now. I think that we have a pretty good sourcing process that we do now. I think, honestly, not selfishly, like, there's the Chenmarks of the world, there's these other groups that are kind of in our similar space that have done it differently and they were maybe ahead of us, and I try to just follow what they've done, and I think that they learned, and I'm trying to extract that information. So the headwinds is trying to not get too far ahead of our skis, I think, is the big thing. I think I was fairly disappointed last year that we didn't acquire something. We went under LOI a number of times. I got rejected by a lender directly saying, hey, you have no experience in this industry, no way. And that was a tough conversation, right? And so we've now taken one business, we got it government contracted service certified, and went through that whole process. There's like 2 numbers you have to get. I can't remember, it was a while ago now. But we went through that whole process, and now we're bidding directly into businesses, and we've actually been able to win some bids. And so now I can go directly to a lender, hey, I can do this, right? And so that's one of the headwinds is our model was predicated not so much on Malcolm, and it probably could have been better, if that makes sense, if I had industry experience in a variety of things, but I just don't. And so it's like, hey, we've identified this sector. We think it's really ripe for the next few years where we can add tangible value. Now I've got to link that narrative. And so that's the big challenge for us.
Think about what John Deere, what is John Deere equipment there to do? I mean, that's food production.
Yep.
So imagine now if you have a bunch of tractors at a at a farm
Yeah.
that are now down, that or they have to pay hundreds of thousands of dollars because they can't repair themselves. The computer's down, whatever it is,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Is that becoming a norm even for, let's say, like in manufacturing? I mean, you've got like multiple CNC machinery
Yeah.
that it's all computers,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Firmware upgrades to something that's down. Now you actually have to bring in someone from Moriseki or
Yeah.
DMG, right?
Yeah.
And is that something when you talk about protecting IP? So this is like multiple questions I'm just
It's okay.
bombarding you with.
Trying to
but
track.
I mean,
I'm tracking.
you talk about protecting IP. Where does that, where do you draw the line on that?
There are certain machines that we use that I would not go into that business for that reason.
Yeah.
Right. And I think the bigger question around all of that is, how are we creating a robust training process that we are the first people they think about in that circumstance, right? And so that's the challenge with us, is that we have seen where people say, hey, I learned from so-and-so, and then I kind of rolled out and did my own business, and I kind of did this situation, right? And so, it's not a perfect model. I don't know if John Deere will figure it out before I do. I'm sure they're trying hard. And so, I think that that's a challenge that we're going to face in all circumstances.
Yeah. And is that the right way to go? I mean, is that right? Is that the proper way for companies to create a recurring revenue stream?
I think U.S. manufacturing needs to have a greater percentage in service than they do in production. That's my perspective. I think there's many others that have figured that out already. And as a result, I'm focused on a certain subsect of a subsect. That's what we have to create out of that, right? Or find some ways to do it. I would be the first to tell you, I'm probably not the best organic growth kind of guy. So we're looking at acquiring those things. Like, I know the owner of the company in Tyler, Texas. He knows who he is. Like, I would love to buy him. And we made that pitch, right? And so I know what he's done. I know what he's capable of doing. And I know how he's built his model. And so either we're going to bring that in-house and we're trying to improve that, or we're going to go acquire somebody to do that. And I think that I think it's what I'm better at, honestly. I'm probably a mediocre operator, probably better sitting down at the 75-year-old saying, hey, I'll take over your business. So, that's just where we found ourselves.
Conversation for a whole new hour.
Sure.
Thank you, Malcolm.
Cool.
Malcolm, peace, everyone.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.